Hello all, I hope you're doing well today. One of the most important experiences of my life was a spiritual experience I speak about a lot. It was about 10 years ago now. A bit of a personal breakdown in my life, which actually led to a breakthrough. And it taught me the most valuable lesson in life, that we always have the ace card. And this is so important when you're struggling along in life. You can get tortured in your own mind. You can get tortured by the drama of the day to day. This is happening to many men, actually, in the Western world now. Now, this, of course, led to my interest in initiations, in death and rebirth cycles, both personally and collectively. You'll see that theme a lot in both the channels. But I wanted to explore what this is really pointing towards, what practical difference this makes in our life. And the first place to start is, you've probably noticed on this channel, I speak a lot about facing your fear, facing your humiliation, embarrassment, suffering. And I'm not doing this out of some sadistic drive for us to be in pain. It's in order to see with your heart's knowledge, not your head knowledge, and that can take time, that very often our ego is trying to protect us. And we should thank the ego for that. It's an unconscious part of ourselves that we're often driven by. But once we start to see past it, we realize, it's trying to protect something that isn't really there. It's often a figment of our imagination. We think that the world is out to get us, but behind that, we can actually realize a lot of the time these are just ideas in our mind, and there is a great freedom in that recognition, a peace that passes all understanding in the words of Christ. Now, I have experienced this especially after I'd had this breakthrough experience, and I remember I had lots of concerns. What am I going to do about work? Lots of social embarrassment. But I remember just being still and praying and meditating and just knowing that everything was okay. No matter the externals, everything's okay, because true life is rooted in the ground of being, and that cannot die. This is what Christians mean by eternal life, mystically understood. There's a lovely quote in the famous work of English Christian mysticism, The Cloud of Unknowing. It's an anonymous author, so nobody knows who wrote it, but it's a real classic of English mysticism. And the quote is something like, "Love is that force which draws us to the ground of being and unites us with God." And this is love truly understood, but it's also your true nature understood. You're not this physical self, or at least that's not the depth of your identity. You're beyond that. And the ground of all being is where we discover that. In more modern language, we could call that something like consciousness, presence, being, spirit. And when we recognize our true depth is in that, we have our true being in God. Again, to use religious language, we are of Him. He's the animating force. In Aristotelian language, the unmoved mover. We then can recognize that what we truly are cannot be destroyed, because it's beyond the physical. Now, I'm not saying here that this means everything's magical from this point on, and you're never going to have challenges, you're never going to be physically hurt. These things are still going to happen. You're still going to be worried at times. You're still going to have heartache. You're still going to be confused about what to do. The difference is that all of that is underpinned by the resting in the love of God. That's what it is. And I can speak from personal experience that sometimes I can get so lost in my own day-to-day life. I'm not being still in that energy. That's why I often advise to men, try and have that time in the morning where you're just doing nothing, where you're just being. And even if your head is being noisy, saying, why are you doing this? And this is stupid. That's all right. Just watch your mind. Because the mind, the intellect, wants us to pull us back into the day-to-day small self-existence. And what we're moving back towards is the infinite space of peace, that's at the root of things. Again, this doesn't mean that once you recognize this or touch this peace within, that everything's going to be perfect in your life. But it allows you to deal with the challenges of life with all the more grace and poise. This is also where the lovely C.S. Lewis teaching comes from. I'm not quoting verbatim here, but he said something along the lines of, it's the love of God that lights the fires of hell. What he means by that is, when we turn away from the love of God, or the peace of being, as it were, and we get lost in, Richard's small world and all of my resentments and all of my angers and frailties, I've created a distance between the natural peace in me and my external life. He's saying something more like that. And if someone like me, who was very lost and very sensitive, plagued with anxiety and uncertainty, and found, trying to find answers to all of that in women and intoxicants and so on. You really get what he means. You really get what he means. I was just chasing fool's gold everywhere. And I still can. I still can if I move into that unconscious energy too strongly. I still can fall into that in various ways. I'm not perfect. No man is. But the point is you start to recognize this dynamic that's going on. You start to see your true self, which is beyond definition, beyond words, and that which is, if you like, the small self, the formulated self, the ideas of the mind that's experienced through the senses. And the reason I'm saying all of this is when we speak about overcoming, or at least working through and facing our challenges, our crosses to bear in Christian language, we do realize that innate peace as we go through that journey. I may have said before on the channel, that came to me when after all of this breakthrough, all the trauma that had to come up, all of the abandonment issues, annoyance with the world, anger with people close to me, women, all that sort of stuff, the craving to be loved and wanted by the world, all that came out, and I kind of put it back correctly in the love of God as I had to. I remember sitting down in peaceful prayer and nothing was happening. Nothing. And the knowledge came over me that this is perfection. Nothing can beat this. There isn't anything in the world that can overcome this experience, because I was just neutrally okay. And at that point, just the gratitude that can overwhelm you of the just majesty of existence, the miracle of existence, how it's held in such perfect order with its infinite complexity. But I don't have to worry about that anymore. God, that used to bug me when I was younger. I just couldn't bear the complexity of the world. So much to think about and so much complexity everywhere. That's all God's business now. I've let go of it. I'll learn what I need to learn and look where he shows me to look. But in principle, we let go to the majesty of existence. And then we're almost flowing with life rather than trying to climb up the stream all the time. Of course, that's a tricky metaphor because, again, some people will say we need to climb up the stream. And that's definitely true in one context. The point of this video isn't to say, in making this recognition that challenge goes away, or we should just, mong out all the time and sit on a mountainside and ignore everyone. You can do that if you're really drawn to mysticism, but I think most men will still have to embrace the challenges of life. And in my experience, sometimes those challenges of life pull me back in. I get lost in them. But the trick then isn't to be like, stupid Richard, you idiot. It's like, I got lost. And my ego took over. I got lost in my mind. Unconsciousness took over. Maybe there's still some trauma response in there somewhere. Maybe there's a lack of faith in there somewhere. Maybe there's a part of my heart which is still gripping onto the ego. But the more I've learned about this, the more I've practiced this, the more I've realised we always have that ace card. You're safe everywhere when you understand this. It doesn't mean you won't go through hellish experiences. You're going to lose loved ones. You're going to lose friends in this life. You're going to get physically injured and go through immense physical suffering at times. Emotional pain. That's all going to happen. It's not about saying this doesn't happen. Again, it's how we approach it with poise and grace. And what we do when we do that is we don't double the pain. I'm doing the 7 steps at the moment with some guys, and this is one thing that we start right at the beginning in step 1 is this exploration of what is it that's really wounded us, because we need to start working that through so we don't pay double the price of pain, get lost in hell, as C.S. Lewis would put it. Now again, the reason I'm saying this is because I just notice in the modern era, and again I can fall into this as well, we get so lost in the stories and dramas of the world, so lost in the news cycles, in whoever we're really resentful against, we're angry against, in our flaws, in our failures, even in our successes. But the point is we need to have that avenue, just as that Buddhist teacher was speaking about many, many years ago, to transcend the self, if you will. And it doesn't mean you have to ignore your day-to-day existence. It's just about having that poise where you can get away from it all of the noise, and just be as you are. Let the mind talk if it needs to talk. The point of contemplation isn't to shut the mind up. It's to watch the mind. And of course, then the real question arises, who and what is watching the mind, if not the mind? The mind can't answer that, but if your heart answers it, you're really moving. Now, again, this is why I'm so eager to try and promote some of these practices that have been very much forgotten in our modern world, modern secular world. I am working on a quick course actually that you guys can work through. It's a daily course. I'm going to try and release it quite soon. But I just wanted to leave this here today to always remember, you have this ACE card. If you start exploring this life, you'll always have it. You find it at the real heart of the tradition as well. You don't need to be a magical monk. You don't need to have years of experience. You can just stop right now and just be as you are, even just for 5 minutes. Forget who you are totally, There's a nice book from, I think it was Timothy Keller, about self-forgetting. He was a Christian pastor in America. He died recently. But this idea of self-forgetting is vital for your spiritual health, for your mental health, and to reconnect with the source of what you are, beyond ideas, beyond thoughts, and just rest in what you are, and just notice the change that brings into your life. It will create space between you and sometimes what can be the hellish experiences of life. It's always worth asking that question. I always say to myself, am I okay beyond this experience? And the answer is always yes. Doesn't matter how bad it is, how strong the pain is, because the truth at the root of you, the spirit at the truth of you, the life at the root of you is synonymous with the life at the root of the universe. Anything can happen in space. You are infinite at your true heart, at your true core. That's God's being, if you will. That's our soul connecting. And it's always open to you at all times. I hope this helps somebody out there. A lot more coming out down the line. Please do join the Substack. I've got a call for all the subscribers coming up on Saturday. It'd be nice to see some of you there. Other than that, take care, brothers. Speak again soon.